folks, thanks for coming back to the channel. Before I get too much further into this, I do want to extend my appreciation to the recent subscribers that I've had sign up. It might be as a result of the 1316 killer video that I put up the other day, and that's fine. I just hope I can provide some semblance of entertainment for you otherwise. And also I just want to throw out there that if you happen to disagree with me on anything in any of these videos, that's fine. Go to the comment section and say your piece. I'm not going to shut anybody down who disagrees. I would say, though, let's try not to do so much of the name calling, because if you do that, I'm probably less likely to respond, because it's giving me the idea that no matter how I respond, you're probably not going to get it. So, with that out of the way, I have finished Ukulele, and so I've decided to do a little video comparing and contrasting what I would call the big four from Rareware. That is Banjo Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, Banjo Tooie, which I don't have a box for, so I had to present the artwork digitally, and then Ukulele, which was released back in April of 2017 as a sort of a Kickstarter spiritual successor to Banjo Kazooie. But it's interesting to go sort of through the games and take a look at how the design changed, and maybe some of the things that stayed the same. So I put together a little gameplay video, and so let's just roll it. Banjo Kazooie was Rare's first major 3D platformer. Released in 1998, this game had you playing as a bear named Banjo, along with his bird friend in a backpack, Kazooie. The story goes that the evil witch Gruntilda longed to be beautiful, so she constructed a device to steal the beauty from one person and transfer it to herself. Banjo's sister Tootie was kidnapped by Gruntilda for her beauty, and Banjo sets off to Gruntilda's lair to rescue her. Throughout the game, you progressively learn new moves and abilities to take you to new places, all while collecting notes and jiggies to progress through the lair. Certain amounts of jiggies were required to gain access to each world, while notes unlocked doors within the lair. Each of the 9 levels are distinctly different and somewhat modest in size, although some are more fun than others. This game happens to contain my favorite 3D world in Click Clock Wood. Each level contained 10 jiggies and 100 notes to collect, as well as 2 honeycomb pieces. Collecting 6 pieces would add another health slot for Banjo. Unfortunately, dying caused you to lose all your notes. Unless you had already collected all 100 of them, you had to recollect them. Some of the levels had you transforming into a different creature, courtesy of the Mumbo Jumbo character, although this was done in exchange for his collectible tokens. The graphics at the time were basically second to none. The engine had a method to partially render objects farther away from the camera, which enabled the game to run extremely smooth almost all the time on the N64. This game ended up setting the standard for platformers for years to come, and some would argue still to this day. 1 year later, in 1999, fans of the Donkey Kong Country series finally got their wish, and Donkey Kong 64 was released. Compared to Banjo Kazooie, this game is massive. So massive, in fact, that the game required the 4 MB expansion pack to operate, although it was later revealed that the expansion pack was required because the game would otherwise crash and Rare was unable to identify the cause. Fortunately, though, the pack was included with the game free of charge. This game had you playing as 5 different members of the Kong family. Donkey and Diddy, of course, along with newcomers Tiny, Chunky, and Lanky. The latter 3 were imprisoned through the first few levels and had to be released by Donkey or Diddy before they could be used. The player could switch between each character by way of a switch barrel, and each character had their own set of collectibles in each level. The game contains 7 main worlds, where each requires a certain amount of golden bananas to gain entry. The worlds were larger than those in Banjo Kazooie, but the addition of warp pads allowed you to quickly move from one section to another. Moves and abilities were also learned along the way, but you had to collect banana coins to pay for them. Since 3 of the Kongs were trapped, the game requires you to backtrack to the first 2 levels for their collectibles. This idea was greatly expanded upon in Banjo Tooie. Each level contained a boss for which the door determined which Kong was supposed to fight it, but a certain amount of bananas were required to gain entry. Each Kong was to collect bananas in order to contribute to opening the boss door. Also in the collectibles were 5 golden bananas per Kong. Each Kong also would gain the ability to use a projectile weapon, such as Diddy Kong's Peanut Pop Gun. Ammo would have to be collected within the level. Each Kong also had the ability to collect and toss orange grenades, which was the only way to kill certain enemies. Each Kong also had an instrument, such as Donkey Kong's bongos, that would create a damage radius.
although this ability was more often used to open doors. Basically, this game took all the design ideas from Banjo-Kazooie and multiplied them by 5. While the game was well received by most players, others felt that the amount of collectibles in the game might have gone a bit too far. The bear and bird were back in Banjo Tooie, released a year later in 2000, and there's probably never been a more massive 3D platformer game. With Gruntilda dead, her two sisters show up and attempt to bring her back to life with a new machine meant to suck the life out of the world and inject it into her. Banjo and Kazooie then set off to the Isle o' Hags to stop them. Each of the 8 worlds are at least twice the size of those found in Banjo-Kazooie, which you can imagine might make for a confusing adventure. Fortunately, a few features were added to assist you. Each world and each section of the worlds have names that appear at the bottom of the screen to remind the player where they are. The game also makes use of warp pads similar to Donkey Kong 64, except you were able to go to any activated pad rather than memorize which number would take you where. Also, this time you were able to control Mumbo Jumbo and use his magic ability to alter certain parts of the level. Transformations are still in the game, but a new character named Humba Wumba is responsible for those this time around. To simplify the collecting process, Rare decided to have you collect feathers, eggs, and even the notes in bundles of 5 or more. This time, notes are used to unlock new moves instead of open new areas in the hub world. Gruntilda's former assistant Klungo provides mini-boss fights between each section of the Isle o' Hags. Jiggies are still required to open new worlds, but you must also complete a puzzle challenge to unlock them. A couple main design differences are that enemies now respawn, and Banjo no longer has a limited number of lives. This also enables you to save the notes you have collected, unlike the first game. Tooie also contains a number of graphical updates and was originally planned for the 64DD add-on, but as the 64DD never came to fruition, it became a standard N64 game. Due to the number of graphical improvements, however, the frame rate in this game suffers dramatically in comparison to Banjo-Kazooie. I myself found it difficult to play in many places because of this, and the game did receive criticism for this shortcoming. In my opinion, this game is almost too big, and you end up spending more time backtracking and trying to remember things instead of actually playing the game. Speaking of backtracking, this game takes full advantage of requiring moves to get certain jiggies that you don't learn until much later in the game. The only slight convenience to aid with this is a large train that can travel between some of the worlds. In fact, at least one jiggy requires you to transfer cargo from one level to another. This isn't all bad since it provides a little variety to the game in that you don't always have to proceed to the next level to keep collecting, since there are more things to be found with your newer moves in the previous worlds. Enter Ukulele. Recently released in April of 2017, this game was meant to be a spiritual successor to the Banjo series and was developed by former employees of Rare. The story goes that Rareware was bought out by Microsoft and basically relegated to developing games for the Kinect. Most of the team that developed Banjo-Kazooie had left and later started a new studio called Playtonic. They introduced the concept for a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie and used a Kickstarter to help fund it. The story involves Yooka the lizard and Laylee the bat attempting to recover a book that was stolen from them by Capital B, who intends to steal all the world's literature and attempt to have all of its knowledge. Ukulele indeed captures the essence of the Banjo games, complete with collectibles and hub world, unique characters, and unique levels. There are only 5 main worlds in this game, but this time each world can be expanded. The worlds are not quite as large or difficult to traverse as Banjo Tooie's were. It tends to find a happy medium between size, scope, and simple design. Where Ukulele tends to fall short is in some of its mechanics. Some of the moves are difficult to perform and control poorly, particularly the flying move learned later in the game. Also, the camera is terrible. Rather than zooming in and out, it seems to go up and down, and also auto moves whenever an object or wall is in the way. This resulted in many dizzy spells for me, so if Playtonic ever intends to update this game, I would strongly recommend updating the camera mechanics to allow us to zoom out, as well as allow it to move through objects. It may not look great, but it will prevent headaches.
So something I didn't mention during the gameplay is the music and the sound effects. The sound effects and the music were basically left more or less unchanged throughout all of these games. And I noticed in reading a lot of the comments about Ukulele that a lot of today's gamers were sort of annoyed by all of the sound effects you get when you pick up items, especially the quills, and especially the character sounds when you're reading the dialogue. Now, fortunately, in Ukulele, they programmed it so that if you hit the action button again, it skips through all of that, and all you have to do is read the dialogue instead of listening to the sound effects. But when Banjo-Kazooie came out, having sound effects like that was like a new thing. The only other big 3D platformer we had at the time was Super Mario 64, and the sounds in that were great. You know, new sounds for picking up coins and mushrooms and that sort of thing. But this was truly unique when it came out. And obviously, these days, that sort of thing is just a regular deal. So it's kind of a matter of nostalgia, I think. Regards to the music, now for all of my music nerds out there, it was cool in Banjo-Kazooie. It was cool in Donkey Kong 64. When we got to Banjo Tooie, started to notice, perhaps, now I know the composer's name was Grant Kirkhope. He also did the music for Ukulele, and it's evident because, in my opinion, there's a little bit of an over-reliance on tritones. But I'm not a composer, and my guess would be is he found something that really worked and he decided to stick with it. The music is appropriate, though, for the setting. It's whimsical, and the problem is it just tends to, for me, it wears on my ears a little bit after a while, especially if some of the jingles are not very long. You're just hearing it over and over and over again, and it just kind of eventually gives me a headache. With that, if I had to choose which one is my favorite, you know, honestly, I have to go with the original, Banjo-Kazooie. And it's not that I didn't enjoy playing any of these other games, but I think I have the fondest memories of this, and a lot of this may have to do with nostalgia, but I knew when I was playing this game that it was something special and something that was going to be remembered for years to come. So, Banjo-Kazooie is my favorite as far as these 3D platformers go. I'm sticking with it. If you disagree, tell me why in the comments section. And I'll probably be like, that makes a good point. So, anyway, we'll see you next time. Everyone take care.